Yeah, hello everyone. So today we are here for one mock interview sessions with Rachana. So hello Rachana. So I welcome you to our Big Data Show's mock interview session. And
Thank you.
yeah, so today we will start our mock interview. So first of all, like we will have a brief introduction about yourself, and later on we will just try to look upon the fundamentals around the big data and the Spark frameworks and other aspects. And later on, so we will try to solve a problem in SQL, and then again I have a problem for you with Python. So once we
Okay.
complete that, then we will go deeper onto like your project works and the challenges which you faced on your projects and other aspects and all. Right?
Okay. Right. Makes sense.
Perfect. So let's get started with your introduction. Yeah,
Yeah. Hi. This is Rachna. I have currently completed my masters in computer science, and I have around 3 years of work experience. More as a data and a software engineer. I have worked like with distributed computing, like using Spark. I have worked with SQL. I have collaborated with like a lot of stakeholders, and yeah, I like working with data. Hence, I am a data engineer.
that's great. That's good
Yeah.
to hear. So you spoke about you frequently work with SQL and all those things, right? So with the organizations you might have worked on with, so what are all the kind of database you have worked on?
So I've worked with both like SQL and NoSQL databases. So like MySQL, SQL Server, and like RDBMS, and I have also worked with Cassandra for a bit. I have also worked with like NoSQL, like MongoDB, and yeah, I think around those lines. Yes.
That's great. All right. So let's get into the fundamentals. Have you ever heard about cap theorem?
Yes.
Yeah. So can you just give me a brief about like what exactly the cap theorem is and what it states?
Yes, so it's basically like CAP is consistency, availability, and partition tolerant. So it's basically like in total, any possible, like we can have only two, we can use only two of the functionalities, and in any particular problem. So let's say consistency. So we have like most of like all of our data that we are sharing, we need it to be like consistent throughout. We won't be able to, like, we don't want it to change over the time, or if someone else is using, so if it's in a distributed manner, we do not want data to be changing. Like if there are two people using the same data, we do not want one person to like change it and then the second person is using like the old data, right? So we want it to be consistent and available, meaning that we want all of the data to be like available at all times, meaning that we try to like have in replicas of the data, so that if there's one node that is falling off, or if it is closing, we have the second node that has our data that is replicated, and once like the first node is back, we can share the data to each other. And the third meaning, partition tolerant, basically, so we have to make sure that sometimes now the data is I think there are different partitions in data, and you have to make sure it is consistent throughout the partition, or it is available. You can put one of the two in place. You can ask, like you can, depending on the situation, right? Like for bank data, you need it to be like more consistent, right? You do not want like the amount to be less or more than the actual amount. And for Instagram or like social media, you would want it to be like more available, rather than the comments being yesterday's or 2 days before, right? So you want it to be more available.
Okay, so you told us about you have worked on with different databases like MySQL and Cassandra and all those things. So can you relate this cap theorem on what are all the two things that MySQL have achieved and what is the two things which Cassandra has achieved?
uh So I think my SQL is more so it is more consistent and available all the time. Cassandra is majorly available and partition tolerant.
That's great. And yeah, I have another questions with regards to SQL. So, what are all the considerations you will consider to choose between SQL and a NoSQL?
Okay, so for SQL databases, I would make sure like the data is more like in a tabular format, or like it has data that is more structured, like you want it to be in rows and columns, rather than NoSQL would require more like a JSON format or like a document format. If you have data that is more key or value, or if it is more like a graph based database, then I would go for NoSQL data rather than the SQL one. That is one of the, I think, major considerations when I go through. Also, like NoSQL database. So, like if you have like a mixture of structured and unstructured, then for sure you go with NoSQL database.
Perfect. All right. So, I believe when you spoke about distributed computing, so you might have used frameworks like Spark or
Mhm.
anything else. So, what is the framework you guys were using on your organization?
Majorly Spark in AWS
Oh,
technologies. Yes.
okay. So, actually, when you speak about Spark, so which platform do you use to deploy your Spark applications?
Platform meaning
Is it the EMR service or like Glue or anything else?
yes, so I have worked with like both EMR as well as like AWS Glue, and like we've deployed like CI/CD pipelines for both of them using Spark.
When you say what is the so again EMR is a separate service and Glue is also a separate service, right?
Mhm.
So what is the considerations you would take to like either choose between EMR or Glue?
Yes, so if so, this was something that was brought up like in my company as well. Like, what are like the use cases of both of those? So, majorly we would use like Glue when we have like ad hoc requests, or when we have like small amount of computations like that need to be scheduled, and it's just like a small transformations or small like. Any kind of issues that are very small, and you do not need like an extensive pipeline for it, that I would like use Glue for. And if it is more like complicated, if it has involves like a lot of joins and like a lot of data that is, that you need to be doing it for like a lot of time, like if I started today, I wanted to work for like the next couple of years, then I would choose EMR for that, because I would want like EMR to be using like proper executors and proper like pipelining rather than like AWS Glue.
So as per my understanding, so you said if it is a very small job, so you go ahead for Glue, and if it is a huge job which requires like a more of join and others bigger like a process, you would go
Hmm.
for EMR, right?
EMR,
But
yes.
why can't you do the same in Glue? So because even Glue also has the given you the provision to choose the number of executors to be like provisioned for your jobs and all those things, right? So why EMR?
Uh, so, I mean, I'm not too sure, but like for Glue, it has certain like disadvantages as well, right? Like not disadvantages per se, but like the amount of time it will take for a particular job to run. I think that is also one thing that we considered, but I'm not too sure about the answer.
Okay, no problem. So, have you ever done a cost analysis between EMR and Glue? Like,
Oh, yeah, I think so. Like that was a long time back, but yes, I think EMR is more like, so even both of those we give out like how much executor or how many memory we would like to use, but EMR is, I think, more cost friendly than, I think, AWS Glue, because we can also like dynamically give out like how much we want it to scale, and it is more majorly like in our control rather than like the PySpark
right.
application.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think we have covered some fundamentals. So, let's get started with the coding problems.
Okay.
So I have shared you a Google Docs link. Can you just open that?
Yeah,
All right. Okay. So so do you have any experience on database modeling?
I have some. Yes.
That's great. So like right now we are going to work on a simple use case. So
Okay.
let's go ahead. Okay. So let's try to create a data model for a banking systems to store very minimal information about users and his credit limit. And also we need to track the transactions made by each users. So basically the ask of this question is basically to we have to create a data model where it can stores informations about a user and also his credit limit. So let's say he's using a credit card and every user will have its own credit limit. And also we need to create a table where it stores the informations about the transactions made by each users.
Okay. So like, let's say, let's
Hmm.
start off with so this is a banking system, and you would want the users with to store minimal information about users. So we would obviously need like a user dim table. We would require like their credit limit, and also so user dim table would have like fields like user details, right? Like a username, then their age, what their like how much. I think credit limit also tracks the transaction made by each user, right? So I think the credit limit could also go here.
Hmm.
And yeah,
Okay.
what else? Like age, birth date, phone number, and stuff like that. Um, and then we would also require this is the dimension table, right?
Hmm.
And
So assume
so
that you're not creating this dimensional modeling. So you are creating this model for a transactional system. So the concept of dimensions, facts will all come when you're like working ahead for the dimensional modeling. So we are basically creating it for the transactional systems.
okay, so you would want more like of a
Yeah,
um,
this minimal information is fine. I'm
uh,
just telling about the naming convention which you used.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So yeah, and then like for transactional systems about users and his credit limit also track the transactions made by each user. So we would have like the transactions that they have made till now. So like per user can have multiple transactions. So we can have like
Mm-hmm.
date, what date they have been using these transactions, and how much amount
Mm-hmm.
um, are they like giving. So they can actually receive, and they can also give out the like amount, right?
Yes.
So we can have like amount give and amount receive. Sorry for like naming conventions, but yeah.
Yeah. No problem.
uh, so date, amount give, amount receive, and yeah, this would also give. So username, users would also have like a, instead of name I would just give ID, and we can just like have a user ID for each, so that we can track which of
Mm-hmm.
the users we are trying to give out. And yeah, this sums up like, since
Okay.
it is a transactional, we would want more of like an like more of a ER rather than like dimensional and fact tables. Am I correct?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So since it is a, banking system which has been used for the transactional modeling,
Mm.
so we have created two entities, so which is users and the transactions. So in your
Okay.
users, so you probably have the user ID. So why not username? Because
Y- Yeah, so we can have user ID and username, so that's not
yes,
an issue. The user ID
yeah,
is basically to like
Just
check
uniquely
back.
identified. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So we can consider that transactions entity has a relationship with the foreign key, which is user ID. So
yes.
how do you uniquely identify a transaction?
Transactions, right? Transaction ID.
And
Correct.
also, so if we speak about transactions, so there is one user who's sending his money to another account, and there is some user who's receiving the amount, right? So how do you track the user who has paid it, and how do you track the user who has received it?
Okay. So we have user ID. So you want, I mean, like if you are giving the amount, you would also like to track like the account number of. So like users would also have like an account number. I'm sorry, I
Let's
forgot.
keep the thing more minimal. So like, I'm not much bothered about the account numbers or something like that. I just
Mm-hmm.
want to know to which user ID this transaction is being made. Who is the payer and who
Okay,
is the receiver?
got it, got it. So, um, it would have a so if it is amount given, we would also like to track like whom the amount is given to, and if the amount is received, we would like to track which user ID is giving us the amount. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we would have another like option in the transactions saying that this is the person that is involved, like the let I can't think of a name, but second or the receiver or sender ID.
Yeah. So if you try to assume a transaction, so basically
Mhm.
for every transactions, the
Mhm.
it will like try to store the information about like what is the amount being transferred and who is the
Yes,
sender and who is the receiver, right?
receiver. Yes, yes, correct. So yeah, I
Sender
think
ID
that would be,
and
and then receiver ID, right?
yeah. So I think maybe the column which is amount given and amount received is redundant, maybe because if someone is giving an amount of like 500 rupees, the same
Hmm.
amount would be there in the amount received, right?
Correct. So we can, instead of giving out amount given and amount received, we can have a column saying that if the amount has been debited or credited. Um, so this would be just like if the amount is debited, it will be debited, and if it is credited, it will be credited. And then we can give out like a column saying amount. So
Mhm.
now we can.
But probably like in the single transactions, so we are
Hmm,
already accounting for the sender and the receiver. So by this
correct.
column itself, so we can understand whose money has been debited and whose monies has been credited, right?
Yes. So again, now these two columns also, like we already know the user ID, right? So
Hmm.
instead of giving out sender and receiver user ID, we would only give out like debited or credited user ID, right? Like
Hmm.
because now we have the person that is already involved in the transactions ID. We just
All right.
want one more person's transaction ID who is either giving or sending receiving the amount, right?
All right. All right.
Makes
So
sense.
I think you might have understood the context of like what we are trying to achieve, right? So
Yes.
what we have done till now is good. So let's move on for the next question. So it's
Okay.
going to be the similar questions, which is around the same data modeling which we try to solve.
Okay.
Um, yes, yeah. So yeah, can you just move this question to the next page by giving the interest?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So basically, this is the transactional model which I was expecting. So since I mentioned like the user data should have like minimal informations and about the
Mm-hmm.
credit limit of each of the users and also the transactional tables, so which holds the informations of the transaction ID. So each transaction should be uniquely identified using the transaction ID and paid by or unpaid to or the user ID, which I'm referring
Okay.
from the users tables. and probably the amount which I'm transferring and the transferring date.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. So, all right. So here we'll try to solve a problem statement. So let's
Mm-hmm.
assume that I want to create a report where I want to show my business users. So who are the users whose credit limit has been breached? So let's say for the user ID one, Peter, his credit limit is 100. So let's assume that he has did his credit spending more than 200 rupees or 300 rupees, which means he has already breached his credit limit. And
Okay.
if someone is falling below this credit limit, then he has not breached the credit limit. So there is no problem with him. So can you scroll down? So
Mm-hmm.
I am expecting an output of such a schema. So where I need the user ID and username and their credit limit, and if their credit limit is sorry, and not so basically the third column credit, what it means is what is the current balance in their credit card? Is it in the plus or is it in the minus or something else like?
Minus.
And
Okay.
if their credit limit is being breached, I just want a boolean column which is the credit limit breach to be yes or
Mm-hmm.
no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So let me get this. So
Yeah.
like for this one, this first particular first row, okay. Let's say the paid by is Peter, and I don't want to see like paid to. I have to see he has given out like 400, like he has used 400 of the credit limit, and while his credit limit is 100. So for this particular row, the output would be more like user ID 1, username would be Peter, and the credit would be, let's say, 300, right? No, wait,
Yes. Yes. It should be the
minus
300
300.
minus 300.
And credit limit breached, yes. Is that correct?
Yes. Right. This is what the output which I'm expecting.
Okay.
But still, you
So,
have to also take the consideration of user ID one in the paid two as well, because there are certain users who has paid for user ID one as well. If you see the third row,
okay.
user ID two has paid for this user ID one.
Okay, got it. Hmm. So, let's see. Uh, so the first thing that comes into my mind is I can solve till like uh,
Hmm.
we'll also have to see paid two as well, right? So when we say paid two, we'll have to increase that much amount to their account, like their credit, and then paid by is basically like uh, minus, right? So
Right.
in the output, if you want, so do you want it like per row basis? So like
No, I just want it based on the granularity of each users.
of each users. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe let me just repeat the question again, so that
Hmm.
we get a better understanding on this.
Hmm.
So basically, so as we said, so we have this users tables and the transactions tables. So the users tables will have all the informations about the users, username, and the credit limit. And the
Hmm.
transaction tables is what like we have the record the transactions being recorded for each users who has paid and who has paid to, and the amount and the transaction date, right? So
Right.
the output which I am expecting is basically on the individual users. So even in the transaction tables, so I can have like multiple entries for each users. I need a aggregated value of how much amount he has left with his credit limit, and I want to know if he has breached his credit limit or not.
Or not?
So as
Okay.
you have shown in the bottom, the
Hmm.
output here you have calculated for Peter, it's actually minus 300. So because the first record in the transactions tables is he
Hmm.
has sent 400 rupees for user 3, so it's like 400, so it's minus 400 plus 100. It actually 100 is his credit limit, so it's
Hmm.
now minus 300. And again, if you see for the third record, which is the transaction ID 3, so user 2 has sent user 1 200 rupees. So right now it has to be minus 100. Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, now it is more clear what I have to do. So let's say this is the user table, and this is like the transaction table. Um, and I can start off with saying that uh, I'll need to select like user ID, username, and the credit. So for credit, now
Hmm.
we'll require. So wait, before that, I need to make sure that I am joining these users, joining on the basis of what, but from users wait. And while I am in the credit part, so now the credit part involves most of our logic, right? We
Hmm.
want to make sure that whenever we get like a 1 in the transaction, like whenever we have a paid buy in the transaction, we have to separate the amount, and we have to also increase the amount for that particular id when we have a paid to like column, right?
Yeah.
um
So our
so
first priority is to be like how do we compute this credit?
yes. um so I can have like a, let's say, a case statement, but we can used. So not a case statement per se, but uh, I can also sum and then difference. I can do. Mm, Still thinking like if I have a paid by and a paid to column.
Hmm. So
Uh,
first we will try to understand. So basically, like if it is a paid buy, then the value has to be added, right? It has to be in a plus. And if it is
yes,
a sorry, it's in a minus, right? If it is someone has paid it,
paid
it
it.
has to
We
be
have to
minus.
minus.
And if
Yes,
someone has been paid off, then it has to be in the plus, right?
plus correct.
So how do you
Uh,
calculate that?
um. So I can use a. I can partition on the basis of like
Hmm.
the paid by, and then subtract it from this.
Okay, first let's try to like calculate the persons who has been paid by. Okay, so
Okay.
how do you like calculate the amount which has been moved out from a person? So it's based on paid by, right?
Yeah, it's based on paid by, and you have to
So
like
basically the amount has to be in the minus value.
in the
So
minus
you
value.
probably will
Yeah.
be like multiplying the amount into minus one to make the values in the minus, right?
Yes. Multiply the amount by -1 and then um, add this amount. Um,
So this is a
okay.
bigger
So
problem statement. So we will try to like separate each of the chunks and we will
okay.
complete everything. Okay. So
Okay.
first, the our problem statement is to find the credit for each users, right? So let's
Right.
try to calculate the users based on the paid by and paid to. So if someone's user ID is in the paid by column, then the
Hmm.
amount has to be in the minus value. Then if
Correct.
it's someone who is in the paid to, then their amount has to be in the positive. So later on, once we calculate this, we'll be able to do some aggregations to see like what is the exact value and all those things, right?
Right. Uh, So for this, for the paid by value, we would want to minus it, right? So we can do something like uh, yeah, subtract, like, right. um, but again, this is more from the user table, right? I would
Yeah, yeah.
want.
Let's. So first, we are trying to solve the credit, right? So in the
Yeah.
transactions tables itself, we already have the reference of user ID in paid by
Mm.
and paid to. So let's
Yes.
just use the transactions tables for now.
Yes, that's what. And then from paid by, we would want, yeah, we would want the user amount from, so we would want credit limit from users like data, and we would want that to be subtracted by uh, the amount,
Hmm.
um, like the amount of that particular person which is paid by, and um, we would do that. But this is again like, um, let's
Okay,
just
let's try to
first.
do this thing. So we will first calculate the transactions who is in the paid by column. Okay, let's
Okay.
take the paid by column. Select paid
Hmm.
by,
Yeah.
comma.
Hmm.
So if he's in the paid by column, what his amount has to be like? Is it should it be positive or negative?
It should be negative.
Yes. So
uh,
-1 and
into like the amount. uh,
yeah, yeah. So so from the transaction status. So right now you have a query which is able to identify the persons who paid by, right, and his
okay,
amount.
right.
So how do you calculate also calculate the amount which who has been paid?
Who has been paid? Okay, that would be positive, like, right,
Yeah,
like. Okay, got it. Now I think I get.
yeah. So if the table structure has been different, as like if they had a boolean value like credit and debit and all those things, we probably would
Mm,
have used case statement to identify if it has to be a minus entry or a plus entry for the amount. But since it
correct.
is in a two different column, so we have to think of a different approach probably, right?
Right, right. No, yeah, makes sense. So if it is a
So
uh,
what can you think of a case of like trying to compute these two paid by and paid to amounts separately and try to union it?
yeah,
Mm.
so I can do that. um, Paid by, and the amount, as like the amount that we would want, and then um, union, and then we would pay to, and
Perfect.
the amount from
Yes.
transaction. Yeah.
So with this output, so you will probably be having the answers about like what are all the transactions happened for each of the users.
Mm,
And we have already computed if it is a debit or credit. If it is a debit, we are like multiplying it by -1. And if it is a
mm,
credit, we are just taking the value amount as it is, right?
correct. Now all we need is to sum like
Yeah,
this
probably we need.
amount, and then over, yeah, we need to sum this amount over their user IDs, like group by like the user ID, and then we need to check if it is breaching like the credit limit. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
So we'll take another 3 to 4 minutes to complete this. So if you have the idea on how to solve this problem, you can just let me know instead of like writing it probably. So what is the next approach you are thinking of to complete this?
Yes, so I can now sum like all the like amount that we've
Hmm.
now calculated from the city, and then we can have like, so I can submit over the IDs, user IDs that we
Hmm.
have. That is the paid by or the paid to column. I can give it like give them the same name.
Yeah, it's a kind of aggregated value which I would get probably for
Yes.
each of the transactions.
Yes, and now once I
Uh-huh.
have that, I can like left join on the user column, saying
Hmm.
that so, and check that if that amount is like uh, I'll subtract that amount with the credit limit that we have here, and if it is positive, then the breached column would be no, and if it is negative, then it will be yes.
Hmm.
And again, like the credit would have the amount that is subtracted.
Yeah, perfect. I just have a question. So you said we have to subtract, right? Do we really have to subtract it with the credit limit?
So now here also, right, like we have 400, and we also got like 200, right?
Hmm.
uh so we had 400 and then minus 2, like minus 400 and then plus 200, right? So we have now minus 200 in our this
Yeah,
when
we
we
already
execute
have
it.
this minus value in this output itself. So why do we again have to do the subtractions? Then it goes on to a summation, right?
Yeah, but we need to also show like the credit, right?
Hmm.
So the
So,
credit would be
mhm.
minus 200 plus 100, which would be minus 100, and then we can like check if it has breached or not, right?
All right. So I'm fine with the approach which you have mentioned. So basically, we are going to like do a group by operations, and on top of it, we are again to do a left join with the user's tables to join with this credit limit, and
Hmm.
again to see that if this credit limit has been breached or not, right?
Yes, correct.
Perfect. All right, then. So let's move on for the next question. So which is around the Python.
Okay.
So can you just move it to a new page? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, this is a very popular questions which has been asked in most of the interviews.
Hmm.
So let me read out this question. So consider that you have been given a string S containing this just this characters, which is the closing bracket, opening bracket, closing parenthesis, opening parenthesis, and closing parenthesis, and open and close brackets. So determine if the input string is valid or not. So how I want you to do the validity is, so if there is an open bracket, it should be closed by a closed brackets. So you have seen
Okay.
like three different types of like closing braces, right?
Right.
So if everything, if it starts with an open bracket, it has to be closed, and certain like that. So open bracket must be closed in the correct order, and
Hmm.
every closed brackets has a corresponding open brackets of the same type. So let's try to look on this examples. Okay, so in the first
Okay.
example, if you see the string input string which is s, it has open bracket and closed bracket, right? So
Right.
the opening bracket had a closing bracket, so in that case it is a true, meaning like it has passed the validation. And the next input which is s, it has like six different characters in it. So every
Okay.
characters which is opening bracket has a closing bracket in the nearby, and
Hmm.
for all the three cases, right? And
Correct.
for the example three, if you see, there is an opening bracket, but its closing bracket is different. It's not of the same case, right? So in
Correct.
that case, I will probably like return my output as false, which means it has failed my validations.
Okay. Makes sense.
So
Uh,
is the problem statement clear, or do you have any questions around it?
it is clear. One question though, like if I have, if it is null,
Mm-hmm.
what would be the output?
Let's consider a scenario that we do not have any null values. Every time the input will definitely have a character in it, and that character belongs to that six characters which is been mentioned in the question.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Got it. So I can start like with the solution. I can tell
Yeah.
you like what my approach, what I'm thinking is. So I'm thinking mainly like to have like a stack,
Hmm.
wherein I give out like, let's say I give out. So whenever we have like an opening brace, our stack would keep on stacking it, like
Okay.
adding it to the stack, and then once we encounter like a closing brace, right, we have to make sure that it is of the same type first of all. So like the closing brace won't be go inside the stack, it will pop like the topmost element from the stack, and we have to make sure that the closing brace is the same as the one that we've opened. So after like, so when, if let's take like the second example, right, so we have uh, these, right.
Hmm.
Now we want to make sure that when we are s- so the first value is opening brace, we'll add it to the stack. The second is closing brace, so we have to make sure that the thing that we are popping, the topmost element, has to be of the same type, right. And we can use like a hash map to store like what type of brace would
Hmm.
have like what opening would have what closing. And then once that is done, we move on to like the second option again. Like
Hmm.
if we have one more example, let's say something like this. So we have to first start off with like the opening brace, it is in the stack, opening brace again in the stack. Now we have the closing brace, that is a curly bracket. The We have to make sure that the thing that we are popping out from the stack is a curly opening brace, correct?
Hmm.
I hope this makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So also, I think we have to consider a case that the starting character in the string should not have a closing brackets.
bracket, yes. Yes, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Also, like once we've popped out everything, we have to make sure like once like we've reached like the end of the string, we have to make sure that everything is popped out from the stack, and if it has not, then it is not
All right.
correct.
All right. Yeah, I think I'm good with your approach.
Mm.
Yes, you can proceed ahead with your implementation. So,
Okay, so I can start off first with like an hash map, saying that um yeah, the hash map would have let's say uh, closing brace would have an um like the opening would have like the closing, and the same would go for, just a minute, and I hope this makes sense. So like I've given the key as the opening and the value as the closing.
hmm, yeah.
Okay. Now when I start with the for loop, saying that for each of the character in the string we'll have like a stack, um, and then we have to make sure that first of all we have to make sure, yeah. So if uh, see like the character that we are now starting off with is in hash map, if it is in hash map, meaning it is all the opening brackets, correct. So we
Hmm.
have to push it in the stack. So stack dot append, and we'll add the character. But that now this is when we are encountering only like the opening brackets. Now we let's say we are encountering closing brackets, right? So we have to um, or actually, instead of this I can give out like the closing brackets, right? Instead
Okay.
of opening ones I can give out like the closing brackets, and then I can make sure that, so
Okay,
let's
you're
say,
just swapping your key and value, just like
yes,
closing as
yes,
the key and opening as the value.
value, yes.
So why is it so?
So now this actually helps like our use case. Wait a minute. So this would help us where here. So if the character is not in a hash map, then we'll have to append it. Now we have to make sure that our character is in hash map, which is like now we'll know that we are only encountering the closing braces, right?
Okay.
So if like C is in hash map, um,
Mm-hmm.
which is a closing brace, we'll have to see that the stacks like last element is equal to the hash maps, like the hash map of the C, right? So like, is the topmost element of our stack equal to the hash maps, like, so let's say, let's give out this, right? We have encountered like a closing brace. Now we have to make sure that it resembles like the opening brace, right?
I see.
This
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
sense, right?
Yeah.
So if like the stacks topmost element is equal to like the hash maps value, then we can pop it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now stack will be equal to stack of everything except like the last element. And I think that's about it. uh, we can also add in like, let's say, if so
So basically, in the
else.
last row, you're basically just popping out the last element.
Yes, so sorry, this should be like an if statement saying that if stack of this is equal to this, then we'll pop it out. I should also actually ideally check if the stack is not empty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And stack of last element is equal to hash map of this, and then we'll pop it out. Else we'll need to return false because it is not the case, right?
Yeah.
And outside this we need to make sure that our stack is not empty, like our stack is empty, right? So if length of stack is equal to 0, then we should return true.
Mm-hmm.
Else we need to return false.
Yeah.
Does this make sense?
So within your iteration loop, so basically we have two if conditions, right? So do we really need the condition to be running for both the cases? Like we have two cases. Either
Hmm.
the C will be as part of the hash map. If
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, makes sense. You can just have an else.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. This looks good for me. So what do you think the time complexity and the time complexity of this?
Yes, the time complexity would be O of n.
Hmm.
Like we are going through all the like uh, characters of the string, so O of n. And
Space
yeah, the
complexity would
space
be.
complexity would also be O of n, because this is still like a constant, but we are not really off n, but for worst case, like if we encounter um only like opening braces and then closing braces, uh, it would still be like off n. Yeah. mostly often, right?
Yeah, of course. In the stack, we are not like storing any values more than O of n, right? So we
Correct.
are
Yeah.
just doing the single iterations, and we're either appending it or we are popping it out.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think we are good with the coding problem.
Hmm.
So yeah, you can just stop sharing your screen. So
Okay.
let's move on into your project. So, can you just give me a brief about your the very recent project which you have worked on, the tools which you have worked on, and what is the kind of use case you have been working on? Is it like a streaming or batching? And it would be more better if you can give you a brief description about it, so we can dig deeper onto it.
Sure. So one of the projects that I had worked on was like data lake creation. It was basically like so we had the thing was that we had like a lot of raw data that was available, but we didn't have like a proper data lake or something in place wherein we could, store all the data and then have like one particular place wherein we have all the data, right? So we had like we created like a data lake in place wherein I also like had to make sure that we have bronze level, a silver level, and a gold level of details for each of the tables. Yeah, that was then shared to like the so I had to like collaborate with a lot of business intelligence team, like the data science team, or the product managers team, and had to make sure what each of their use case was, and then depending on what their use case was, what the golden level table would have more of, like depending on their requirements. So the bronze level table would have just like the raw information, the silver level would have like more of cleaned data, clean data mainly, and no like aggregations or anything like that over there. And then in the golden level of table we would have more like aggregated data that we need to give out to like the use cases.
So I believe the architecture which you have built on top of data lake resembles more on a Medellin architecture. I believe you guys have
Yes.
tried to like replicate the raw of silver and all those things. So why do we really like go for a Medellin architecture? So why not we can just let's say like you have a raw layer and
Mm-hmm.
you want to like have a goal layer which is a consumption layer by your business users or like data science team or anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So why can't we just have a single transformations to just clean your data and aggregate your data and keep it informed in the goal layer directly having
we
a silver layer?
we can do that, but it would have like a lot of repetitions, right? Like the gold layer would have like, let's say we have data science team, the business intelligence team, and like one more team, product managers team, and they all have like different use cases. So like in gold level table we would have like let's say 100 or more than 100, and for every each table you'll have to like clean the data again, and you'll have to like make sure that it is giving out the right date information. You'll have to perform like quality checks on it. Like why would you want to do that like 100 times, right? So instead it's like better if there's like a lot of repetitions like these, it's better to like store the clean data in like a one particular table, set of tables, and then we can use that instead of cleaning it again and again.
All right. So till now, like we have discussed like more about a high level architecture of your project. So
Mhm.
can you just get me more deeper into the low level architecture on how your data pipeline is built? What is your source? How you have extracted the data, and
Mhm.
what kind of frameworks did you use to like perform the transformations? And how did you load the data into the data lake? And how it has been orchestrated, monitored, and all those informations.
Yes, so it started off with like AWS Glue. I started off with like, so ingestion part was cron jobs. Basically, we would have data from different sources, and then we it would be partitioned into like S3 buckets. We would get data in different S3 buckets, and then we would try to so the whole thing was basically with PySpark, like the AWS Glue we've used to transform the data and to clean the data, and again to like push it to like the mid layer, which is the silver table and the golden table. And then we've used CloudWatch to monitor if there are any issues like with the pipeline, or if anything fails, we get like an alarm. And apart from that, we've used Airflow to like schedule the jobs and make sure it runs like, so this was majorly like a batch level processing, so hence like it was d minus 1 day days data, and hence we would use like Airflow to, which was scheduled at like at a particular time, that would run once in the morning. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Okay. So, in this project, so have you ever faced any challenges in Airflow, like any of the problems, like failing DAGs or failing task or something else like?
Yeah, yeah. A lot of times, so initially when we hadn't given out much quality checks, there were times wherein like the JSON wouldn't be like in the correct format, right? And the Airflow would of course, like not the Airflow, but it was internally where our own like this would fail. And the Airflow would fail majorly when so whenever there's a failed job, right, we have to make sure we give like enough times that it can be repeated, so it can run it again if the on failure. We would make want to make sure that we run it again. So we have this, I think, functionality in Airflow itself, that the number of retries that we are given if any of the job fails. So we've used that a lot to make sure that sometimes like our jobs would have like a lot of shuffling, and that would take like a long amount of hours, and still our job would fail at the end. So sometimes it's like we have to like monitor the job a lot, and then make sure that Airflow is giving out the right um, job ID, and we are running like the correct jobs.
I see. I see. All right. So, basically, let's assume that you have mentioned about shuffling and all those things, right?
Hmm.
So, let's say that a particular job is not failing, but it's running for a longer time.
Okay.
So there is no one who's monitoring this. So since your job has not failed, you'll never get an alert for your task failure, or even you will not get notified with your CloudWatch, right? So
Right.
how will you be able to identify this long-running jobs through Airflow or something else?
Through Airflow, I think so. When we Airflow, I think, has like a functionality. I'm not sure if I remember it correctly, but wherein we can it notifies you saying that it is, I think, taking like a long time. I'm not too sure about this answer though.
Okay. So have you ever hear about like settings called SLA?
SLA. I have heard about it. I don't know if I've used it.
Yeah. So basically, Airflow provides you the settings SLA. So where you
Mm-hmm.
can mention like what is the maximum time of executions your Airflow jobs can
Okay.
be running on. So
Okay.
if it
Okay.
exists that particular timeline, so you probably get an alert or like you can do whatever you want with that.
Okay. Makes sense.
All right. I think I'm good with our interview.
Thank you so
Let's
much.
wind it up. So thank you, Rakshana, for your time and all the best for your future interviews and all.
Thank you so much, Manoj, for taking this interview.
Yeah.
It was
Thank
a
you.
pleasure. Thank you.